Very showery lately, but as Sandra pointed out, is not likely to dry out again till next spring, so there's no point putting off the trials any longer. The tracks are damp, if not actually wet, and that's not going to help traction at all. The plan is to take the flatbed wagon round to the muck heap terminus and see if it can pull wheelbarrows up the hill, or not. The problem is the flatbed wagon itself is heavy. The plywood is soaked and there's now more steel work on it than before. So I'm not expecting a lot from the trials, but let's see what happens. Lovely stuff.
Yes, thanks to the horses and the sheep and the chicken and the donkeys and guinea pigs and everybody.
Yeah.
And me for shoveling it around the place. And you for shoveling it around the place.
Okay. We put one wheelbarrow on first, partly to check the simple device I thought up to hold the barrows in place with minimum fuss. The pipe slips through the barrow legs and the ends go under the frame of the wagon, and it's held in place with pegs on chains. It's just a way to stop the barrows moving about or falling off without using lots of bits of string or something, clips. And actually that worked fine. The other end. So I'm hoping that this... Now weight shouldn't matter too much on the level. With steel wheels on steel tracks, the friction is low, so most of the energy is used to get the load started and to keep it moving. And if it was dead level, then the momentum would help carry it along too. So theoretically this little engine should be able to pull lots of weight on the level, but of course we have a serious slope to get up, and that's where the problem is. It rises 1.2 meters over about 30 meters, which is 1 in 25 inclination, but it's not even, so some parts might be steeper than that, maybe 1 in 20. So of course the engine has to pull the wagon along the rails, but also lift its own weight and me and the weight of the wagon and the barrows 1.2 meters into the air. And the engine alone might weigh 300 kilos. Now, every locomotive would meet its limit sooner or later if you keep asking it to do more work. And the way I see it, one of three things will happen at that point. Either the engine will stall, or the transmission will fail, something will break, or the clutch will slip or something, or the wheels will start spinning on the tracks. So those three things could all happen, but of course one of them will happen first and then everything stops and you know that you've reached the pulling limits of your locomotive, or your car, or whatever it is for that matter. But nothing failed on that first run with just one wheelbarrow aboard. We struggled a bit, but we reached the top of the slope. try it. Mind your head, that's all. Okay, I don't know if I can do this at the same time. I'll try. Then we just trundle back down the slope and around the field to try the same thing again with a second barrow. I once owned a 1962 Trojan Black Maria. Not this one, of course, but similar. Anyway, one day, going up a steep hill, one of the half shafts broke in two. I was a teenager at the time, and it was very miserable because I was living in it. And it took months to track down a replacement because there was no internet, of course, back then. And I had to hitchhike 200 miles to get one. Anyway, I'm just reminded of that during these trials because, of course, the broken half shaft is an example of the transmission failing when too much load was put on any vehicle. In this case, if the transmission fails, it's likely to be the rubbery disc slipping on the drive wheel, I'm guessing. It only just made it up the hill with one wheelbarrow. It's a bit disappointing. So we'll have to find... Well, try it though. Try it the next one. Sandra is aboard too at this point with the two barrows, and as soon as the ground rises, the engine has to work harder. Now, I confess I'm filled with misgivings at this point. Getting up the slope with one barrow is, kind of alright, but it's just not good enough. On the level again, no problem at all. Doing a round trip from the muck heap to the garlic beds with just one barrow at a time is out of the question because it would just take far too long. And two barrows wouldn't be enough either, really. So if the slope is too much for the locomotive, then I have a problem. As I say, the level ground is easy, and I dare say this engine, this locomotive and all the wagons and everything could be hauled along for miles, literally miles, if we didn't have to go up any hills. That's why railways often go circuitous routes to avoid hills, and if they can't avoid them, tunnels are dug, anything to stay as level as possible. I paused at this point and Sandra went ahead so she could film the challenging bit halfway up the real slope, and this is what happened. I was taking a run at it at top speed and the engine came very close to stalling. So let's try again with a different gear ratio. This time the wheels start spinning. Try again. And you can see the slope better from this angle.
Oh no!
And you can see how readily it rolls back down the slope. Now this time this is more or less in bottom gear with the rubbery wheel near the center of the CVT drive wheel. And with a lot of struggling, we just about made it up the hill. Whew, not great, is it? And not worth even trying with the third barrow. It's just not going to make it, which is a bit sad. Because, as I said, 2 barrows per trip just isn't good enough. So what to do? Well, my first thought was to dig a big hole and curl up in it. Because after all, we've been working on this for many months and garlic planting time is fast approaching. But what other options are there apart from a hole in the ground? Well, many people are telling me the tracks are too narrow. Too narrow, Tim. That's why the wheels are spinning. But let's just have a look at that. Imagine that the tracks were twice as wide, say. So the contact area between the wheels and the track would be twice as big, wouldn't it? But the weight would be the same. So the pressure on any given bit would be halved. So actually the wheels would be more likely to slip, not less. Now it's true, if the wheels were running on mud or sand, having a bigger contact area might increase the traction, but steel on steel, which is what we have, traction would quite likely be less. Now lots of people suggest adding sanders, things that dribble sand just in front of the wheels. Often they have to have brushes inside or compressed air to stop them clogging up, but I'd like to try a simple version just to see how well they could work. Now other people have suggested putting rubber tyres on the wheels, and yes, that would help traction a lot, but it'd also make it much more difficult to drive along in the first place, even on the flat, because friction would increase hugely. Railways are such wonderful, efficient things just because they do have such low friction. There's also the question of how long tyres would last running on such narrow tracks with such a big heavy weight on them. Another interesting suggestion was having a cogged track on the slope, as mountain railways often have. That would work, but positioning a driving cogwheel might be tricky. It would have to drive at the same size and speed as the existing wheels, or there would be a confliction between them. So setting that up could be a challenge for sure. And of course there were various ideas for pulleys and ropes and counterbalances. Again, they might well work, but don't forget I'm using 2 hands already to drive this, one on the CVT drive and one on the clutch. How would I hold a rope around a capstan at the same time, for instance? It's certainly not impossible, but not straightforward either. One interesting thing to note though with these trials, of the 3 possible failures I was predicting, only 2 occurred. The engine stalled and the wheels slipped, but the transmission didn't fail. The rubbery wheel didn't slip. I say it probably suffered a little in low gear near the centre because it's partly twisted sideways, but it still worked well. It is interesting, isn't it? I think so. And the old Lister engine, well, you can see how hard she was working. This is the cooling water. I'd say that's what they call a fast boil. A cup of tea, anyone? So many things to think about and many options still open to save the day. You see, I was hoping, of course, to get 3 barrows up the hill, and I don't really want to start rebuilding the Loco to include a cog drive system or rope pullers if I can help it, especially so close to planting season, but I might have to. But I do have a much simpler plan which I want to try first. So, fingers crossed for that one.